This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you click on the link in the description below, it'll take you to their store and they'll know I sent you there.
From Innistrad to Shadowmoor, what spooky top 10 does Nitsuhone have in store?
Hi everyone, I'm Nitsuhone, and it's Friday, so that means it's time for another MTG Top 10, the series where I rank cards based on their historical performance at Magic's highest level of competition. We're getting close to Halloween, so that means this is another Halloween-inspired MTG Top 10. The 22nd Halloween-themed MTG Top 10 I've ever done. If you're looking for the other ones, you will find the playlist in the description below, and it will also be shown at the end of the video. Zombies are a great creature type to look at for Halloween. They are so fascinating and popular that they even have their own film subgenre. Zombies are, of course, reanimated corpses. In Magic, zombies are almost always black, and they appear on just about every plane. I have actually done Top 10 Zombies before, but it was the very second MTG Top 10 I ever did, and it originally came out on March 11th of 2016, believe it or not, 4.5 years ago. Back then, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to be doing with these lists, and it's mostly an opinion-based one. A few videos later, I settled in on the methodology I still use today, or at least the forerunner to it. So while this is the second MTG Top 10 on zombies, it's the first one based on competitive tournament data. Anyway, to be eligible for this list, a card simply had to have the zombie creature type. Usually, when I do a list on a creature type, I also include cards that can make creature tokens of that type, but if I did that in this case, the list would be completely dominated by various Lilianas and other cards that make zombie tokens. As a result, I wanted to really zoom in on cards that specifically have the zombie creature type. In all, there are 471 cards with the zombie type, and in this video, we'll look at the 10 that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. Before we get started, here's a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. A top 8 at a Pro Tour, Players Tour, Mythic Invitational, Legacy, or Vintage Championship is worth 2 points, while a Grand Prix or Magic Fest top 8 is worth 1 point. Alright, let's get to the list. At number 10, it is Prized Amalgam. We're going to see a lot of zombies on this list that do stuff with the graveyard, so Prized Amalgam is in good company, especially because he likes it when other stuff comes back from the graveyard in particular. It is pretty awesome to get this 3/3 body in play for free when you're already getting some nice value out of your graveyard. The Amalgam was not played a whole lot in Standard. Standard usually doesn't have enough graveyard shenanigans going on for a card like this, but it was played in decks alongside Scrap Heap Scrounger and Haunted Dead. The Amalgam has been the most successful in formats with much larger card pools like Modern, Legacy, and Vintage, where graveyard decks are super viable. In all three of those formats, the Amalgam is played in dredge decks that run stuff like Narcomoeba, Vengevine, and Icarid. At number 9, it is Carrion Feeder. This one-drop can block, but with everything else it has going on, you don't really care. The feeder gets most of its power from the fact that it has a free sacrifice effect. Those types of effects are great, not only because it can make the Carrion Feeder huge, but also because it can allow you to pull off various combos. One of the combos it enabled was the famous Legacy Hulk Flash combo. The plan with the combo was to play Flash and put Protean Hulk into play. You don't pay for the mana cost of the card, so you just let it die. Then the Hulk's ability triggers and you search up Carrion Feeder and Karmic Guide, and the guide brings the Hulk back, which you then sacrifice to the feeder. Then the Hulk dies and you search up Kiki-Jiki and then copy Karmic Guide. Then you get Kiki-Jiki back, make another Karmic Guide, sacrifice Kiki-Jiki to the Carrion Feeder, and rinse and repeat until you can attack for lethal. The feeder was crucial to the combo since it made sure you got cards into the graveyard to get back with Karmic Guide. The combo was quickly banned out of the format because you could pull it off super consistently and way too early. More recently, it's been played in Hogak decks in both Legacy and Modern. A reprint in Modern Horizons has given it legality in that format. While the feeder doesn't exactly have special synergy with Hogak, it gives the deck another access to operate on. These decks tend to be made up of lots of creatures who come back from the graveyard, and those can provide constant fuel for the feeder, who gives you a win condition other than Hogak. The feeder has had a renaissance thanks to Hogak Dredge, and while the deck was banned out of Modern, it's still legal in Legacy, and it's likely that it will continue to be played there, and I wouldn't be surprised if it finds a new home in Modern either. At number 8, it is Putrid Leech, another aggressive zombie. This 2-mana 2/2 will usually feel more like a 2-mana 4/4, and sure, you do have to pay life to make it a 4/4 each turn, but that's a small price to pay for such an efficient creature. It generally feels like a poor man's Tarmogoyf. In both Standard and Extended, it was played in Jund mid-range decks, but it doesn't have any points since 2011. At number 7, it's Midnight Reaper. This zombie likes it when it or other creatures die, since he makes sure that your creatures all replace themselves when that happens. If you have a creature-heavy deck, Midnight Reaper is a nice inclusion since he turns pretty much everything into a 2-for-1. At the beginning of the Reaper's time in Standard, it was played in Golgari and Sultai aggro decks, but it really took off in the various sacrifice decks. Combining the Reaper with Woe Strider or Cauldron Familiar is pretty gross, and will net you a ton of cards in the long run. It has also been played in the Historic version of the same deck. The Reaper is likely to continue to accumulate points in Historic, where sacrifice decks appear to be well positioned. At number 6, it is Grey Merchant of Asphodel, a zombie who drains the opposing player an amount equal to your devotion to black. Even on an empty board, that means it drains 2 life, but most of the time when you play him, he has a far bigger impact on the board than that. Devotion to black decks were a big force in Standard, and Grey Merchant was a big part of that. Some versions of the deck also ran Whip of Erebos, which was particularly nasty with the Grey Merchant because it could allow you to get that enter the battlefield triggered twice, and most opponents have no hope of ever coming back from that. While the Grey Merchant was a force in Standard, it hasn't gained any points since rotating, despite the fact that it was also recently reprinted in a Standard legal set. At number 5, it is Stitcher's Supplier, a zombie that is incredibly good at loading the graveyard. For 1 mana, it ultimately puts 7 cards into your graveyard, and that is amazing efficiency. It is another graveyard card that wasn't really played in Standard though, again, because there just weren't graveyard decks for it to fuel in the format. However, graveyard decks in other formats love Stitcher's Supplier. In Modern, it's been played in Bridgevine decks, and it also helped push Hogak decks over the top, as it was the ideal 1-drop for the deck. Its ability to load up graveyards has even led to it being played in Legacy Dredge decks. I expect Stitcher's Supplier to continue to accumulate points, as it really is one of the best ways to enable graveyard strategies in this entire game. At number 4, it is Murderous Rider. The Rider is an adventure creature, which means that before you cast it as a creature, you also have the opportunity to cast it as a non-creature spell from your hand, in this case as Swift End. Swift End is a powerful removal spell, killing any creature or planeswalker for only 3 mana at instant speed. You do have to pay 2 life, but Murderous Rider helps make up for that because when you cast it as a creature, it has lifelink. Adventure cards are frequently just inherent card advantage, and that's really the case here too. Kill something efficient with the spell half and then cast it from exile later in the game as a 3 mana 2/3. Sure, those stats aren't impressive, but they are when you already use the exact same card as a removal spell. It has been pretty close to a staple in both Standard and Pioneer, where most blue decks usually play at least a few copies of the card, whether they are aggro decks like Mono Black or Rakdos, combo decks like Dimir Inverter, or control decks. It also has 1 Mythic Invitational top 8 in Historic, where it was played in a sacrifice deck. It's going to continue to accumulate points going forward. At number 3, it is Lifebane Zombie, a zombie with a powerful color hosing into the battlefield ability. While it was in Standard, there was a pretty good chance that your opponent was holding a white or green creature card in their hand, since Abzan was one of the most played decks around, and one of the nice things about this zombie that is not true about all color hosing effects is that this has a pretty reasonable fail case. Even if you can't make your opponent get rid of a card, you still get a 3 mana 3/1 with Intimidate that gives you information about your opponent's hand, and it also didn't hurt that it added 2 to your black devotion. As a result of the metagame and the reasonable fail case, Lifebane Zombie was actually played more as a main board card than as a sideboard card. It has never gained any points since rotating out of Standard though. At number 2, it is Gravecrawler, another zombie that does stuff with the graveyard, and it's also a zombie payoff. Sure, it can't block, but it is a 1 mana 2/1 that doesn't stay dead, and that's well worth the downside. In Standard, it was mostly played in tribal zombie decks where bringing it back was easy. These decks also ran Mortar Pod, which could give you a constant source of damage if you keep sacrificing Gravecrawler to it. The Crawler could just keep going at your opponent and just keep coming back without too much difficulty. Gravecrawler also gained points in Modern Vengevine and in Legacy in a zombie bombardment deck that sought to keep just hitting the opponent with Goblin Bombardment plus the Gravecrawler. Modern graveyard decks started to get a lot better in 2018, partly as a result of the aforementioned Stitcher supplier, and partly as a result of people really harnessing the power of faithless looting. This meant Dredgevine decks got a considerable power boost, and the Gravecrawler had some modest gains in 2018 and early 2019. But then, all hell broke loose when Hogak was printed in 2019. It was played alongside Carrion Feeder, which we've also already seen, as a non-Hogak win condition in both modern and legacy versions of the deck, with the Gravecrawler being sacrificable to the Feeder every turn for very little investment. Ultimately, both Hogak and Looting got banned out of Modern in an attempt to make graveyard decks less insane in the format, and Gravecrawler has been silent in the format ever since then. But all of those cards are still legal in Legacy, so it seems plausible that Gravecrawler could gain more points in that format in the future. And at number 1, it is Gurmag Angler. While just a big vanilla creature, the Angler comes with Delve, and in a deck that is particularly good at loading the graveyard, it isn't hard to cast the Angler on turn 2 or 3. In Standard, decks couldn't load the graveyard quickly enough, so the Angler has no points there, but in Modern and Legacy it has seen some significant play. In Modern it's been played in decks like Death's Shadow and Hollow One, both of which already have a game plan that involves throwing stuff in the graveyard in a hurry. In Legacy it's been played in Grixis Delver, Death's Shadow, and Bug Delver. Gravecrawler isn't too far behind Gurmag Angler, so there could be some shifts at the top of this list in the long run. Well, those are the top 10 zombies in Magic. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future videos, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. And if you're looking for more Halloween-themed MTG Top 10s or just MTG Top 10s in general, you should see both of those playlists on the screen now. Thanks for watching.